Hi, this is Father Joe Cisetti. Thank you for joining me today. Something we all have to manage in life is disappointment. And on November 18th, the church holds up for us a saint who had to deal with a lot of disappointment in life. Her name is Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne. She was born in France in 1769. She was born into a well-to-do family, and her parents sent her to be educated at a convent school of the Visitation. However, she started to develop an attraction to that way of life, and her parents were not in favor of it, so they pulled her out of the school and hired tutors for her. Eventually, one day, she was able to convince her aunt to go visit the monastery there, and there she petitioned to be received and to stay. So basically, she ran away from home to join the convent there in 1788. A few years later, the French Revolution came about. The convent was dissolved, and she had to go back home. So there was disappointment with all that. And then eventually, when a peace was made with the church, she tried to refound the convent, was not successful. There were three sisters who were able to stay with her there. It wasn't working out. Another disappointment. She eventually met St. Madeleine Sophie Berra, who was founding a new religious community, the Religious of the Sacred Heart. And they were going to be teachers. And she joined them, and she was an important part of the founding of that religious community. And then, with other sisters, she set off for the New World. They landed in New Orleans, and they went up the Mississippi to just outside St. Louis in what is St. Charles, Missouri. And they founded a school there, the first free school west of the Mississippi. Now, and that's where she was for a number of years, and their community continued to grow. Something she had dreamed about even as a child was to work among the Native Americans, and that wasn't happening. They were certainly doing missionary work. Life would have been very primitive there, but she still had this dream apparently within her. And at the age of 71, there was an invitation from the Jesuits who had a mission in Mound City, Kansas. And she and some other sisters went up the Missouri River. They would have gotten off probably at Westport Landing, which is downtown Kansas City, right around where the Broadway Bridge is. So they probably would have been the first religious sisters to set foot in Kansas City. Even though they didn't stay there, they went out to Mound City, Kansas. Now, she was very old at that point, and she could not learn the language of the Native Americans. And basically, she could do two things. She could play with the children a little bit, and she could pray. And that was perhaps one reason why they sent her, was to pray for the mission. And the Native Americans referred to her as woman who prays always, because she prayed so much and so long. There's a story that sometimes she would be in prayer, and they would sneak up behind her, and they would place a kernel of corn on the folds of her dress. And then they would come back much later and realize that it had not been moved. And there was possibly another reason why they sent a woman that old there, and that was because the Native Americans respected the elderly. After 1 year, her health wouldn't support being there, and she returned to the St. Louis area, where she continued to live for a number of years. She lost her sight, and so more disappointment, and then she passed away in 1852. She was canonized by St. John Paul II in 1988. But what she shows us is perseverance. Perseverance even amidst disappointment. And right now, with everything going on, a lot of people are experiencing some disappointment in their lives. St. Rose Philippine Duchesne gives us an example of persevering in disappointment, Persevere literally means to serve through even the disappointments. We can serve God even in the disappointments in our life. She is a patroness of perseverance in adversity. She also was a teacher, and she realized something that's very important, and that is that education is more than just sharing knowledge. If you simply share knowledge without sharing virtue, well, you're really creating, at least potentially, an evil genius, someone who is smart but not necessarily good. So it is the purpose of any education, not just to help people gain knowledge, but to help them to be good. And if you separate that goodness from knowledge, it becomes something dangerous. This is what she said. You may dazzle the mind with 1,000 brilliant discoveries of natural science. You may open new worlds of knowledge which were never dreamed of before. Yet, if you have not developed in the soul of the pupil strong habits of virtue which will sustain her in the struggle of life, you have not educated her, but only put in her hand a powerful instrument of self-destruction. The purpose of education isn't just to make people knowledgeable, it's to help them to be good. And the purpose of a Catholic education isn't simply to help people to be good, but to help them to become saints. Amidst the disappointments that we face throughout our lives, may St. Rose Philippine Duchesne assist us with her prayers and inspire us with her example. St. Rose Philippine Duchesne, pray for us.